Welcome back to Week 13. Hopefully you enjoyed the holiday blooper special we aired for you last week. Now it's back to business as usual. Now in Week 13, we're approaching the playoffs. For most of you, your playoffs will start next week, maybe the week after, or for some of you, even this week. Now, hopefully your team is playoff ready, and hopefully you're playoff bound. But if you're not, now this is where some of you subpar teams that are, have a low record, you may not make the playoffs, or maybe are for sure out of the playoffs. You can still play spoiler, and this is where you play for pride. And you don't want some of the other members in your league just walking into the playoffs. So maybe this is where you play one of those risky plays, but maybe it pays off big. High risk, high reward, and maybe you can play spoiler. Anyways, Week 13 and the final tune-ups for playoffs are now in progress. Grab your playbook, because school is in session! Week 13, let's get down to business. Our first matchup brings us the Thursday night game, the New Orleans Saints at the Atlanta Falcons. I think this game is pretty much going to be a shootout, so who do I like in this game? Pretty much anybody that plays on either of these teams. Honestly, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, I think there's going to be a lot of scoring, a lot of passing. Julio Jones, Roddy White, Darren Sproles is back. I even think he's going to get in on some action. Colston, I'm not a huge fan of Michael Turner. He did score a touchdown last week. The Saints defense run defense is suspect, but Jacquizz Rodgers has been stealing a lot of carries from Turner. Our next matchup brings us the Seattle Seahawks at the Chicago Bears. Honestly, there's not too much to like on the Seahawks side of the ball because of the Bears defense, and really on the Bears side of the ball because the Seahawks defense is pretty stout as well. However, you've got to like Cutler and Brandon Marshall. They're a deadly combination. He throws the ball to him 10 to 20 times a game, so he's guaranteed to get some catches. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Forte's probably out, so it looks like Bush. So if you're in you need to try to make a steal, maybe you start Michael Bush at running back this week for the Bears. Other than that, maybe Kellen Davis at tight end gets a start. He looked pretty strong last week. And now we have the Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. The Titans' defense is pretty suspect, and the Texans' offense is pretty dominant. So you've got to like pretty much everybody on their offense. Schaub, Foster, Johnson, even Kevin Walter. Make sure Andre Johnson is healthy before you start him. And, of course, Owen Daniels gets a start for me this week as well. On the Titans side of the ball, Chris Johnson's been, looking fairly decent over the last 5 to 6 weeks. However, it's the Texans' run defense that's pretty tough. They will be behind, so their receivers will score a few points, but it's a gamble as to who's going to get the most points. I would probably pick Wright. And that brings us to the New England Patriots at the Miami Dolphins. Honestly, on the Dolphins side of the ball, with Reggie Bush splitting so much time with Thomas, you can't really like either of them against the Patriots defense. Really, the only one I start on the whole Miami side of the game would be Hartline, because they're going to be behind. They're going to have to throw in order to catch up, which means Hartline will get the ball in the passing game. On the Patriots side of the ball, I like Ridley. He's coming up on 1,000 yards. Of course, Brady, Welker, Brandon Lloyd even this week I think is going to have a big game, especially with Gronk out, and I think Edelman will step up big as well. Now, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Buffalo Bills. Honestly, on the Jaguars side of the ball, you really can't start any of them unless it's going to be Chad Henne throwing them the ball. Yes, Jennings has been a nice fill-in, and actually against the Bills' softer run defense, I think he'll do all right. If Henne's starting, then I would actually start Justin Blackmon or Cecil Shorts, especially if I'm trying to play spoiler, because those are guys that I think are going to be behind. They're going to have to throw, and Blackmon's been a monster the last couple weeks. If you would have been watching me in week 6 or 7, you would have heard me say pick him up and keep him on your team until later on the year, and it would be paying off dividends for you now. The Bills side of the ball, I do like them all. C.J. Spiller's getting all the time now. Fitzpatrick, Stevie Johnson, against the Jaguars defense, there's going to be a lot of scoring. I even like the tight end Chandler. Our next matchup brings you the Indianapolis Colts at the Detroit Lions. There's 2 young quarterbacks in this game with Andrew Luck and Matt Stafford, and honestly, I'd start them both. I think this game is going to be a decent amount of passing involved. Both these young quarterbacks are gunslingers and like to throw the ball. Calvin Johnson's been hot lately. Young, Pettigrew, you get him involved. You know, Hilton and Wayne on the Colts side of the ball, I think both of them are actually going to have a strong game this week. And, you know, Donald Brown's been starting to carry more and more of that workload in the running game. I don't like him this week against the Lions, but moving forward, he might be somebody you may look to have going into the playoffs. Next matchup we have in store is the Carolina Panthers at the Kansas City Chiefs. On the Chiefs side of the ball, if Brady Quinn is getting the start again, honestly, the only person I would start on that team would probably be Jamal Charles, because they would rely on the run game heavily in that game. You know, as far as the Panthers, Cam looked pretty good last week, as well as did Steve Smith and LaFell. I would give both of them a start against a subpar Chiefs defense. And Jonathan Stewart's out, I believe. You may look at starting D'Angelo Williams if he's going to be healthy. He may get the whole workload. And now we bring you the Minnesota Vikings at the Green Bay Packers. Viking side of the ball, you got to love Adrian Peterson. Any game, every game. You know, Packers defense is decent. Their run defense is not that great, though. You know, and especially since the Vikings, Harvin may be out another week. You know, really, they don't have a great passing game. They're going to rely heavily on Adrian Peterson, so you know he's going to get touches. The Packers side of the ball, you know, Aaron Rodgers is going up against a fairly tough Vikings defense, but it's a tough run defense, not a tough pass defense. So Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, you know, should get the ball, and they should score you know, a few points. As well as the running game, they'll most likely get shut down against the Vikings' tough run defense. And now we bring you the San Francisco 49ers at the St. Louis Rams. If you remember when these teams played just a few weeks ago, they tied. So we'll see what happens this week. Hopefully one of them will be good enough to win and beat the opponent. Now, as for the changes that have been made since then, on the 49ers side of the ball, you now have Colin Kaepernick at quarterback, who has shown a little bit more of an offensive potency. For that reason, in this game, I actually do like Crabtree, and I do like Vernon Davis. On the Rams side of the ball, guess what? They're playing the 49ers defense. Pretty much, I don't like anyone on that team this week. And our next matchup brings you the Arizona Cardinals at the New York Jets. You know, on the Cardinals side of the ball, they've been, you know, playing with a little bit better rhythm on offense as of late. And so for that reason, I actually like LaRod Stevens-Howling at running back. Larry Fitzgerald this week, I like against the Jets. You know, their defense isn't as scary as it has been in years past. And even Roberts, and if you're in a, you know, don't have a very strong tight end and you're looking to play spoiler, you may look at picking up Hausler for Arizona. He may be available in free agency, and he actually may have another big week like he did last week. The Jets' defense is not as good as it used to be. On the Jets side of the ball, really the only one I would like would be Dustin Keller. He seems to get the ball consistently, even when Sanchez struggles. And now that brings us to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Denver Broncos. You know, the Bucs pass defense is a little bit suspect. The Broncos pass defense is actually decent. Now, the Bucs do have a running back in Doug Martin who will score you some points. I don't think he's going to do phenomenal like he's been doing the last few weeks, but he'll get you some points. I think Josh Freeman will do okay, about average, maybe slightly above average. Vincent Jackson and Williams should both do pretty good for Tampa Bay. On the Broncos side of the ball, you got to love Peyton Manning, Decker, and Demaryius Thomas. Hillman will probably be subbing in for McGahee, who is out at running back. And Jacob Tamme has finally been showing up these last couple games. If you have him at tight end, you may even give him a start this week against a weak Bucs pass defense. And now that brings us to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens. You know, is Ben Roethlisberger going to play this week? Because that's what's going to make your decision on really whether you start any of the Steeler receivers. If he does happen to play, sure, you start him. If he doesn't, I don't know if you can start any of them. You maybe start Miller, the tight end, as a backup valve. You know, on the running back situation, Dwyer is supposed to get the main start. Mendenhall might play, so you may look at starting either of them. I just really am not a fan of any of the Pittsburgh running backs with all their big timeshare going on there. On the Ravens side of the ball, you know, Joe Flacco, Ray Rice, Torrey Smith, Anquan Bolden, I think they're all going to have above-average games. Even though it is a tough Steeler defense, I think they will do very well. And that brings us to the Cincinnati Bengals at the San Diego Chargers. You know, both of these defenses are actually fairly tough, but Andy Dalton, Phillip Rivers, you know, they like to throw the long ball. I really think there's going to be an actual shootout in this game, and I like A.J. Green, Floyd, Denario Alexander, Hawkins. I really think all of them are going to score some points along with both of these quarterbacks. The tight end position, you know, I like Grisham. You know, Gates has been on and off this year, but this week I actually even like Gates. And now that brings us to Cleveland Browns at the Oakland Raiders. You know, this is an interesting game because on the Cleveland side of the ball, there's a lot of players that can actually score you some points. You know, the Raiders' defense is not that great. Brandon Weeden should even have a strong game this week. Trent Richardson also should have a strong game, as well as Little and Josh Gordon. Now, on the Raiders side of the ball, because I feel like this is actually going to be a lot of points scored in this game, Palmer should do well. Denarius Moore, you know, when they're behind and they've got to pass, Denarius Moore catches a lot of balls and usually gets into the end zone once or twice. I like him. I like Brandon Myers at tight end. I think those guys are going to be above average this week. And our Sunday night matchup is the Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. You know, honestly, if you watched the Philly game last week, you will realize that if Nick Foles is starting at quarterback, there is not one person on the Philadelphia Eagles that you should start. You know, maybe if you want to try to play spoiler, you start Brown at running back. If he gets the start again this week, that may be a good little gamble. On the Dallas side of the ball, actually, you know, to be honest, I like Des Bryant. He's been on fire lately. Felix Jones, you know, Philly's defense is not that scary. He should do well. Tony Romo, I think, will actually put up slightly above average points as well. The Monday night matchup is the New York Giants at the Washington Redskins. This should be a good one. Eli Manning against RG3. Both of them, I think, will put up above average points. I think it's going to be a shootout. I honestly think there's going to be a lot of running going on. You know, really, Bradshaw Morris, Hakeem Nicks, Santana Moss, Victor Cruz, you know, even Pierre Garçon to get in on some action. You know, hey, there's going to be some points scored. So if you've got a Giant or a Redskin, I would actually go ahead and give them the start this week. As always, we appreciate your support here at the Other Fantasy Guys. Thanks for watching our Week 13 matchups. Now, if you have questions about your team as you go into the playoffs for Week 14, post the question in the comment box below, and we'll do our best to answer it on the show next week or in the comments themselves. As always, make sure you like this video, subscribe to our channel for future updates, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Tune in next week where I will show you how to make a steel fire bowl with a power-coated folding stand out of a little bit of cardboard, some clear sheets of plastic, and a nice slab of steel you have lying around.